First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hey, yo, friends. As you can hear, my voice is completely shot. But I'm just doing this intro, and then my voice isn't shot for the rest of the episode. So hopefully you can understand what I'm saying right now. This is a part 2, a continuation of our little 2-part series on the importance of high school theater. If you haven't listened to the last episode, check it out. Joshua talked to a lot of people who were involved in his high school theater program. He couldn't talk to the leaders themselves because they've unfortunately passed away. But I had the great privilege of talking to 2 of my most influential teachers from the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts. Both are no longer teaching there. And it was just great to catch up with them. These are truly magnificent artists. And after those conversations, Joshua and I are going to sort of debrief on everything, what we've learned over the past couple episodes. And, these were just really important conversations for me to have. They reinvigorated something in me, talking to these 2 very, very influential mentors of mine. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce them both now, and then we'll get into the interviews. So my first interview is with Joni Weisfeld, who is a nationally recognized performing artist. She's the artistic director of The Other Voice, a performance art company dedicated to the indescribable. The wordless performances are fiercely physical, theatrical events that seek to unearth the unspoken. She directed the company's first piece, Masks and the Monster, which premiered at the Hartford Fringe Festival in 2019. The company's second piece, Believe, was produced in August 2022 at the Asylum Hill Congregational Church in Hartford. Joni received her BFA in acting from the University of Connecticut, UConn. She has also trained with the London International School of Performing Arts, Double Edge Theatre, and the Evangeline Company. Her expertise lies in movement-based techniques including Suzuki, Animal Essence, Lecoq, and Butoh. And boy, do we get into that because that's how she taught too. As an actor, Joni has performed throughout the country. Her experience, ranges from classical to contemporary. She has acted in published plays, new work, devised pieces. She's also a comedian specializing in the physical realm with a background in stand-up. As a director, Joni has reinvigorated older works like The Taming of the Shrew, Romeo and Juliet, The Seagull, and Medea. She has created new work for the New York and Hartford Fringe Festivals. Fiercely collaborative, Joni has fostered new play development with Bated Breath Theater Company, Heartbeat Ensemble, Playhouse on Park, and Hartford Stage. She serves currently on the adjunct theater faculty at the Art School at the University of Hartford and is an arts ambassador for the Greater Hartford Arts Council. So Joni will be my first interview. Then I'll be talking to Brian Jennings. He's a Connecticut-based theater artist and educator. He currently serves as the assistant professor and coordinator of actor training at the Hart School. He previously taught for 27 years at the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts, including 7 as chair of the theater department. He is a longtime member of Heartbeat Ensemble, Hartford's Theater for Social Change. His professional work includes acting, directing, and writing in venues ranging from local parks to national television. So without further ado, I'm really excited for you guys to listen to these conversations. Enjoy. So good to see. It's been a while. Yeah. I feel like the last time I saw you was in, I don't even remember. It was probably like when you did that performance, when you did your showing with Brian and Calciano. I forgot it was like the first thing The Other Voice did, I think.
Yes. Oh, did you come to that?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think it was. Okay. And actually, my co-host is Michael Calciano's longtime boyfriend. So
no way.
Yeah, so we've been running this business together for like 5 years. So
Yeah, so he's my co-host, Joshua. So he's very familiar. I was like, I'm talking to Joni. He was like, oh, is that the other voice? I was like, yeah, and he's like, oh, that's so cool because he loved it. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. I miss Michael too. He's such a gem.
He's talking about movies. He's making
I know. I saw on Instagram.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's making a lot of stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of just a couple questions. The first question I have for you, and I do want to give some context in a second about sort of well, let me ask you this first. How did you get into teaching in general? How did you find your way into teaching?
I think I accidentally,
Sure.
In New York, I was making some extra money teaching like little kids.
Sure.
And they paid really well.
Right.
And I didn't have to work very often.
Right.
And I liked it.
Yeah.
It was like challenging and also like fun. And I liked that.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to do it forever, but I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually I was like possibly thinking about getting out of the city. And my now husband, boyfriend at the time, he was in Connecticut, and he had an interview with Jonathan Gilman to teach at the academy.
Right.
And the money wasn't like enough for him, like based on where he was in his life. But he was like, "Oh, my girlfriend might be interested in this position," and I just interviewed for the position. I knew I wanted to direct and like collaborate with talented people. I heard this place was amazing, and that's it. I literally just like fell into it.
Wow.
I had never taught before.
That's
aside from like pre-K.
That is, I want to talk about that a little bit more, but that is wild to me that it's just, because it that you just kind of came into it like that. I mean,
yep.
And then you just were like, okay, and you moved to Connecticut, and that was it. Yeah, it's amazing.
I think I thought that I was not going to be there for long. I was like wanting to maybe go to graduate school for directing. And I was like, well, this will be good because I'll be like making things and directing.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, I just like love collaborating with these young people. Like I love it, and I'm learning a lot, and so I'm going to be here for a while.
I mean, and can you provide what is the academy? Because it's funny, I try to as I've been out of the academy now for 15 years, I guess.
Wow.
I know, it's not well. Oh God, it feels like it. But I tell people about it, and I'm like, I hear about other like sort of like the governor's school, like in various. I'm like, hear about all these other schools. And I'm like, we were doing crazy shit, like awesome, cool. And so, can you do? And I felt like I was at the height of like when Academy was like really like special in a lot of ways, and it was like its purest form. And so what is the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts?
So as you know, I haven't been there in quite some time.
Right.
So when I first got there, to me, it felt like a conservatory.
Right.
And just with high school students as opposed to like adults.
Right.
Where, again, this is when I first got there, where students were coming from their home schools and like going half day to the academy to study whatever their art focus was.
Right.
And that it was competitive. They had to audition to get in. And that these were people that were just like dying to work, and they were, it was very much like that. And I actually went to a program similar to that when I was in high school.
Oh, really?
So, so I was like, oh, this definitely, like, I know this is familiar to me. And, just like the discipline, the rigor, the high standards, it was really special.
It really did feel that way because, like, we would get, because, to provide context, like, it was people from all over Connecticut, right? We would go to our public school, or, some people, I guess, went to a private school or whatever, but, like, public school, and we would get bussed in, like, around noon. I was trying to
Yeah,
remember
I think
this.
it started, it was like 1 to 4:15.
That was the
So
class. We were only in class for 3 hours.
yeah,
God
yeah,
almighty. It felt like
I
it
know.
felt like all day, but then we would have rehearsals.
Yes, and so rehearsals were like 4:30 to 6:30, or sometimes they would go till 7. Yes, so the students, I mean, and then they were, obviously coming from their home schools, so it's like a super long day,
Right, right, right. And
and nobody complained,
oh
like
God.
they were like, yes,
Oh, it was
I want,
amazing.
yeah,
And something I was in general, because obviously I think you were probably, my biggest influence there. And I think about, you know, certainly I think probably the biggest influence teacher I've really had in a lot of ways. Like I even after college and stuff like that in a lot of ways. And I mean, I was thinking about, because you taught Suzuki, that was
right,
like, you taught Suzuki, you taught movement for the actor, and it was,
right,
as I recall, we'd get something like Trojan Women or something. We would get something like, an excerpt, and you'd be like,
yeah,
okay, make something, and you would sit
right,
in the corner with your Suzuki
yep,
stick or whatever, and you would
yep,
watch, and we would
yep,
devise and collaborate and build like a
yeah,
like a like a 5-minute movement piece based off
yep,
of the text. And it was so, I mean, you're doing that your sophomore year of high school, and you're just like building these
yeah, it's
massive.
unbelievable, yeah.
And so how did you, I guess, my question is, how did you curate, and I do also want to say this too, is that, because I was in Big Love when you directed that, which is a pretty
Mm,
crazy show, and then this production of
right,
Cabaret that was
yeah,
just wild, and it was
yeah,
edgy, and it was just felt very, it felt very raw, it felt very animal,
hmm
and so how did you curate curriculum, like when you would walk, like what were you trying to impart on students? How did you curate curriculum, you
hmm
know what I mean, like because it was so
yeah.
unorthodox in a lot of ways, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I when I first got there, I didn't know how to create a curriculum. I
Right,
did not know. I
right.
was like learning as I went, and I was planning a lot and like learning from other teachers, and I was terrified a lot of the time because
Mm,
I really didn't know. I mean, I had the like skills and the love, the passion for it, but I was just like thrown into the fire.
right, right.
So I think by the time I had you, I was a little more like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now.
Yeah, right,
And so I would create curriculum um, based on what I loved,
right,
like what I love to do, how I love to work,
right.
um, and I really felt like I was like collaborating with the students,
100%.
and we were like learning how to do it together. And some of it I had to make up and found like, oh, I wish I did this. Like I
Mm,
was like making up how to teach an acting class
mm,
using what I love to do, but never really taught. It was really
mm.
wild.
Yeah,
Like I
right,
was learning how to do it like
right.
as an actor as a teacher, like all at the same time.
Wow,
It was very wild to me,
wow.
and I learned so much from it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that answers your
Well, no, what
question.
it answers is that I mean, I think that that's the way to go, right? Because it's like, you know, I teach too, like I teach Shakespeare. I coach privately, and I teach it
Yeah.
in a couple places and stuff. And it's like, I'm not teaching for personally. I don't feel like I teach Shakespeare the way anybody else teaches Shakespeare, but it's the way I employ it when I do it.
Yeah.
And it's also how sometimes I wish I was taught Shakespeare, right? And it's like, and you're trying out what's so wonderful about teaching is you have to clarify sort of your
Yes.
process, and you try things out, and you have to give words to your process. and
Totally.
kind of take it out of the ether in some ways, even though there's always going to be a part of it that's in the ether, and sort of try and ground it and try things out. And so I hear that, and it's cool to have the opportunity to like do the kind of work, because I would even say from a directing standpoint too, it's like do the kind of work that you care about, right? So you're,
Totally.
the kind of work that you would want to do. I want to do this play, and that's what it felt like. We did all types of like plays,
Oh, yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
challenging material, and it was like, oh, like there wasn't pulling of punches. You got to really do the things that you wanted to do in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
and I don't remember ever being like, I want to do this, and being, at least when you were there,
Yeah.
and being told no. And so there was just like a lot of, and some of it was like sort of, again, kind of scary, because I was like, I don't know, here I
Right.
go. I think I am like, I think this is good, and I
Right.
want to do this, but I don't know,
Right. Right.
And nobody said, oh, you can't do that. And Jonathan really was like, I mean, you can say, what you want about him. I know that some people like have critiqued him in the past, but that he really did foster this, like, sure, you want to do that? Great. Like, yeah, try it. Go ahead.
I think it's cool, and it's like, I even think about, me in rooms professionally, right? It's like, what I really, it all kind of comes back to your class, and like, being able to, that idea of like, we're kind of pushing the boundaries, and we're collaborating, and we're kind of diving into the unknown to just, like I said, just to get a script or hear a song and be like, and we're not dancers, we're not dancers. And just to be like, okay, like, let's make a movement piece. And it's like,
totally.
And that kind of being like, not thrown to the wolves, because that has negative connotation, but it was like, like jumping off the edge and trusting, and just being like fostering failure, and then presenting. It was just structured so well, because then you presented it to people, so it wasn't just like in a vacuum, like you would present these works in progress to people. And like, it's allowed me, I mean, I trace it all back to that, like ownership in a room, like being able to kind of be fearless in a room and collaborate, and truly build ensemble. And I'm curious what your thoughts about this, because there's so much talk in my ether lately just about like what it means to build ensemble in a lot of ways, and it's interesting to me, because like, there seems to be a lot of like reverence around and it's like ensemble's a feeling as opposed to an action in some ways.
That's interesting. That's really interesting that you say that. And like, there's also a lot of cult like information out there now too. I don't know if like, do you listen to any of those like cult podcasts, like a little bit culty?
I go deep down many rabbit holes. Sure. So yeah,
same. So that, I think it, like, sometimes looking back, I'm like, was I sort of like a cult leader? Like that, like, I hope I wasn't, but I can understand how ensemble creation can kind of feel like that. I don't agree that it's, a feeling, right? That you have to like do something, but that you do have to be really like open, and you have to listen. And sometimes you have to, and recently I worked as an actor, and it had been so long since I performed. And I was like, wow, what a different, perspective to be. I learned so much, right? Because what a different perspective to be on the other side of this, and like how much space, the director has to give to each fucking one of us.
Yes.
Like, we had a lot of needs,
Of course.
and the director, just like facilitating that, and how much like you have to give space, and you have to be patient. The director does, the actors do, like, so much is involved in creating an ensemble. But it is about listening, but also about action. Are you doing are you feeling like there's a lot of work in like feelings.
Well, oh yeah, I definitely feel that way. And it's like, well, in general, there's like one of the things that I was like thinking about you and Brian, who I'm going to talk to as well, is one of the things that I thought was really powerful about your guys' teaching styles was you, and I hope that you were intimidating to a lot of us because there was, first off, you guys didn't talk a lot, right? It's like, especially you were not it's not like we were talking about the work and talking about all of it. Like, it was a lot of, we got to the room,
Yeah.
we would do some Suzuki, you give us the piece, and then it'd be like, you were quiet a lot of times. And I say this in a good positive way because
yeah,
I feel like there's so much talking about I'm in general just like kind of allergic to reverence and in processes. I think that it's kind of detrimental in a lot of ways. And what you guys fostered was like, just do the work. Okay, we're not going to talk about how important or all that, but it was about just the work. It's like, okay, let's get to work, right? And it's like, I feel like, not to go on a tangent, but because like so many artistic all institutions, we're sort of in a fourth turning crisis moment. I feel like where so many institutions are sort of crumbling, which is, I think, a cycle of Western civilization that we go through. And so all of these artistic institutions are constantly having to justify themselves, talk about the importance of the work, talk about the importance of ensemble, and we're together and we're telling an important, and there's, as opposed to like, let's just do the fucking, like, that comes with the work, right? That comes with just doing the work.
totally.
And
I
that
agree.
rigor, rigor in the room of like, we're here to work. We're not here to sort of like talk and philosophize and all this shit. Like, we're here to build something, and that's where we learn, and that's where we sort of feel the importance, right, of what we're doing.
I can't do it another way. I don't know how to do it. Like, and sometimes, well, that's why I got a little worried about, I'm like, am I a cult leader? Because of sort of some of the stuff you're talking about. Like, we do, like, we have the discipline, we have the training, we make the work. I do think that that's good, but I'm like, oh, is that a little culty? I don't, I don't know. I never wanted Suzuki or like my way of doing things to be the only way of doing things.
It didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that was really special about Academy was that we got really diverse perspectives. And it was, to me, I think in a lot of ways, like, rites of passages are kind of going away, right? And part of a rite of passage is having like, for lack of putting it, an elder, like a mentor, sort of like, come in and not impose, but to sort of like say, this is what we're doing. This is, and a lot of, I think, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that you're sort of talking about here is sort of this hyper awareness we have about power imbalance now. And like, oh, well, who is the teacher to come in and tell me well, that's what you're signing up for. When you enter a class, it's like, that's always been the kind of student I am, is like, when I enter a class, like, it's like, I'm here because I don't know anything, and that's just how I have to approach it, right? And so it's I don't think it is culty. I think it's just the nature of, because now, so many, I mean, you still teach at Heart, obviously, so you're probably experiencing
at Heart,
so you probably experienced this like in a college setting. It's like there's a lot of hyper awareness about hyper, being terrified of the students,
Totally. And I am, so you're absolutely 100% right. And that I think when I went to school, that it was like too much in the opposite direction, meaning that we had, authority figures that were incredibly like abusive to us.
Right.
And so I have to like recognize that, but also be like, that's not good. I have to still focus on the work and the discipline. But then there is this push on the opposite direction of like, take care of the students. The students are very tender and we have to be so careful. And I don't really want to go all the way there either. And I mean, I have some privilege in the fact that, like, at least at the Hart School, I'm probably one of the younger people. I know
Yeah.
that's crazy.
No, it's not
And
crazy.
being a woman, that I am like less scary as far as that. Like, I have
Sure.
privilege. I can say things that some of my colleagues can't say
Sure.
because of like who and what I am.
But there was
But there
really
is
clear boundaries, you know, like
yeah,
that you guys had. It wasn't like,
yeah,
you know, and I say that because it's like really like it seems like of course there's got to be boundaries, but it's like there's so many teachers
yeah,
can't find that balance of like you're my student, you know,
yeah.
and that's how I you know, not to, you know, I'd show up, you know, smelling like cigarettes, or you know, maybe once or twice a little hot. I think you caught me smoking one time, but
Yeah, you weren't the only one though. I've caught a few people smoking.
yeah, or maybe once or twice, you know, maybe showing up to class a little, you know, under a
Sure.
substance, but you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and it wasn't like it was just like a don't do that.
yeah.
And we're not going to get into it, not a personal thing, just don't do that.
No.
That's not a good idea. But it's not like,
Actually,
yeah.
Secret League of Michael Calciano. Oh my God, this was so good. I did not know that he was smoking pot. There were 3 other people that I knew for sure were smoking
Yeah.
pot. And so I called them over to me after, this was like after Fall Showcase or something.
Yeah.
I called them over to me, the 3 people that I knew were smoking pot. And Michael Calciano just comes over. Like, I didn't have no idea he was smoking pot. He just came over so scared. He like couldn't even lie and just walk away. Really, really funny.
That's
and yeah,
cool.
all I did was say like, what's like, are you seriously? Are you kidding me? Just like get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't like we're getting into all the. It just felt like there was such a healthy boundary between you guys taking care of us and being, you know, in a lot of ways, like, you know, mentor figures to us. But there wasn't an overstepping of never in my experience.
No,
You
and
know,
I can't go there.
no.
And I'd say all the time, and some stuff that comes up, you know, which can be challenging with like work in the other voice, is that the like characters are based off of the performers,
Right.
you know, real life experiences.
Right.
And so I need to be really careful in like, we talk about what's going on, but that, you know, I say often, like, this isn't like therapy
Right.
and you don't have to share anything. And this is all pretend. This is still just like pretend.
Right.
But, you know, that can be tricky when you're like creating work based off of
yourself.
Your own
right.
Yeah.
And so this kind of leads to another question I have, which is like, how do you, you know, because you have your it's not just a theater company, it sounds like it's moving in other directions too, but like
I would call it performance art,
you know, company, the other voice, which is, you know, it's been around for what, like 6 years more probably, right?
Something like that.
So you have that, you know, you still perform, you know, professionally occasionally, you direct at the, you know, you teach at the Hart School, you know, you're not teaching at an academy anymore, you know, and you have, not only that, you have 2 kids, right?
I do.
And so you have all of these things going on. I guess just my question is like, and it seems like you've always been busy. Just how do you balance it, and where does teaching fit into, how do you balance sort of like pursuing your artistic goals with, you know, teaching, with, you know, helping support your family, and just how do you balance all of these things, I guess, is my question.
I don't know. The thing with having kids is that they're like, it's weird because people said this to me before I had kids and I was like, I don't know what you mean, but they're like part of my blood and my like breathing, you know?
Right.
So it's
yes,
like
of course.
maintaining them just the way I maintain my like own living. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Which is a very weird concept.
No, I'm with
but
it.
it's,
I'm with it.
you know,
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah,
like
sure.
another appendage that I have to make sure doesn't die. And you know, and they are amazing, and they make, you know, there's so much about them that like humbles me and makes me a better artist.
Yeah.
Teaching, I love teaching. It's because I still am like learning so much when I teach.
Yeah.
And I love collaborating with young people. It's getting more challenging because of some of the things you've been describing, as far as like that I have to like be more sensitive, and
Right.
sometimes it feels like that's like that the work takes a back seat to that.
Right.
But I've learned so much working with students. I just always do.
Right.
I have a hard time and always have grading students.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I still just like can't wrap my head around that, because it is so what's the word? Like, it's personal. You
Right.
know, I think this student is doing great work. I think that they've worked hard. I think their work is great, so they get an A. Here's another student who's working just as hard, but just the work isn't as interesting.
Right.
So do I give that person like a B minus? But
Yeah,
when you look at it
exactly.
on paper, it's the same, you know?
Yeah.
So that is like becoming even more difficult.
Right.
And myself as an artist feels like only in the last 10 years am I really understanding who I am as an artist.
Yeah.
And feel recently with these like physical challenges, I'm like forming. I'm like in process.
Yeah, exactly.
And some days it's really hard where I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I putting out into this world right now? And sometimes
Sure.
I'm like, wow, it's just nothing,
Yeah.
So it's a struggle. Sometimes I'm really overwhelmed. When I was working as an actor, a couple years ago in Boston, so I was like staying there sometimes and driving back here sometimes.
Yeah.
I felt really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I feel overwhelmed often when I'm directing something because it's just so consuming.
Right.
And it's hard for me to take in anything else.
Right.
From my family or otherwise. So I get overwhelmed. But those are pockets. Day to day, I don't feel like, how am I going to manage this?
Well,
I don't know if I'm doing the best job. But
sure. Well, no, I think that
Yeah.
that's the path. And, one of the things that I really respect about you is that I feel like, sorry, my girlfriend's cats come crazy. I really respect that, like, it feels like you have created the environment that you have wanted, like with your teaching. Because, look, I think often, and this is kind of a weird tangent, but like, kind of what we're talking about, it's like so many artistic institutions are sort of being challenged, and like, it's like, what is success in the New York theater anymore? Like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It kind of means nothing. Like, social media's, like, entertainment's democratized, like everybody has access, like, so like the monopoly on sort of art and entertainment is really being challenged. And so, it makes me go like, well, why is this, when 95% of the things I see, I'm like, okay, but it's New York, it's this,
I know.
it's New York. And that's becoming more and more irrelevant. And I say this because, I often think about, like, well, more and more, I'm like, even, as I work, I'm like, why? Just go to fucking New Hampshire and start a theater company. Like, who the fuck cares? I'm
Right.
like, what is it? It means nothing. It means nothing. Like, all that matters is sort of the art that we're making. And one of the things I really respect about you, long-winded way of saying, is that it feels like whatever environment you are in, especially teaching, but also the work I've seen, your company do, and you are leading from your values, right? And you're creating the world that you want to inhabit, right? From an artistic standpoint, it's like you are doing the work that you want to do, that you think is important, and you've created these opportunities for you to be able to do that, whether it's collaborating with young people, whether it's your company, right? And so that to me is what I'm really impressed with. It's like you're always somebody staying true to your artistic values and creating the type of environment and spaces that you want to work in. And that's all we can really do, right? It's like, that's it. That's everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the time I am. It's like I said, I struggle with like, like this film that I'm working on. Any new thing I want to do, I'm like,
Right.
oh God, I got to raise the money. And like,
Of course.
it's like exhausting
Right.
thinking about that.
Right.
But yeah, like once I'm in it, once I'm working, I feel like it feels right.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, wow, I'm doing this thing that I think is important and it feels so right, even though it's been like exhausting getting here. I don't, thanks, I try, but I'm not above like, wow, I need a couple bucks. So
Of
I'm
course.
going to like I'm going to be involved in whatever performance. And also I'm really lucky that my husband earns a living because the money I make from Heart is terrible. And as a performer, like when you get a gig, it's not great.
Yeah, it's not like it's exactly.
No.
Exactly.
So I'm not, I'm lucky in that respect, is that I have a partner who is like providing for our family.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last question I have is kind of a very general question, but because you've worked with college students, you've worked, obviously professionally with actors, leading them, guiding them. What do you think the importance of high school of working with high schoolers is, in sort of like high school art, performing arts education?
Mm-hmm.
Even being some time removed from it, what do you think the importance of it is at the end of the day?
For the student?
For the student, for the world, for you, for all the above.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that I never know until, like you, when students grow up and they are doing things and they are putting out work into the world that's really exciting. And then, I think, wow, like we started that together.
Yeah.
And to start, at least, when you were at the academy, the fostering of creating your own work was really prevalent.
It was.
Like, it wasn't just me that we were doing that, right? It was like tons of the other faculty. Brian was doing that. That is so amazing, that at like 15, 16, that you guys were making your own work. And then I get to look at you now, and like, see, like, look at that, that like spark fostered what's happening right now.
100%.
It's really awesome.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. It's cool. And I definitely attribute it to that, because it's like, without given that sort of agency at a young age, like that really being treated like an adult, but still obviously being treated like a student, but like, from a work perspective, like an adult, it does something to you. It's a very special, it's you can't replicate it. It's like, even the people like, have gone to, quote, great schools, like me and Michael after the fact or whatever. It's like, there's still something different, there's still something really different that you guys were doing. And
that we work together,
exactly.
Like you and I, like, we collaborated.
We did.
We were like equals, and that was like so great for me to be learning from these young people and working together to make something. Like you're in your class and the class like before you and after you, I felt that so much. This camaraderie.
100%.
Even though, like you said, I'm like more of like an authority figure, that we were like together. We were in it together.
That's super valid. Well, that's a great note to end it on, and it's just making me think about, also how, it's how I want to teach and lead too. It's just like, it's a collaboration. It's not like bestowing of, you know, my worldview, right? It's like a truly a
Yeah.
collaboration. So, and that's
Yeah.
super. Well, thank you. This is awesome, Joni. Thank you
Yeah.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Something, yeah. And I would argue you still know about. You know, I know you haven't.
Yeah,
It's
probably.
been what? It's been like. When
It's
did
been
you
2
when did
years.
you leave Academy? 2 years.
2 years. 2 years. But, you know, I go back. I still go back every year.
Oh yeah, to
'Cause
do like
Mike and I
what?
are still doing six plays in 6 days. We're still doing
Wow.
that. Right? So I'm still back there for that.
For the people, what is 6 days? 6 plays in 6 days.
Oh, are we recording now?
Yeah. I'll edit
Okay.
it. Don't worry. It'll be a nice little
All
thing.
right. So yeah, so 6 plays in 6 days is, we call it it's a festival of student devised drama. So we put together generally 6 teams of actors, directors, and writers.
Mhm.
We put them together on a Monday. We give them some parameters and some themes to play with. They get a prop. They all get a set piece. They get a line of dialogue that they have to use. And then we say go to, and by Saturday night, they have to come up with a 10-minute play that's rehearsed and ready to perform. And for about 16 years now, they've done it. So
it's wild. I mean, yeah, because that started like right at the end, I think, of my time there.
Yeah, I think it's 2009. 2009 was the first one.
I think I was. Yeah, exactly. I was a senior, I think, when the first one happened. I don't even know if I participated technically. I don't even remember. I don't think I did. I think it was just. But I
it was just a thing. It was just a weird thing that was happening then.
It was awesome. Exactly. Right.
It went on to become kind of this cultural touchstone for the school.
And that's really important. You know, I mean, you know, one of the things that, you know, Joni and I were talking about was like, and it was kind of wild when you think about it, just how much freedom the students were given to create. And that's why you guys, you, Mike, Joni, Deb, I mean, everybody, even like Dave McCamish, I think about like, there was a culture of true collaboration, like, you know, through action, through creating, because that's the only way you find it. And the fact that how much, and we felt like peers, you know, like this was really interesting. Like we all felt like peers, the students and the teachers, in building something. And yeah, it was just incredible that we got to do that.
I mean, I think that was one of the unique things about that program in that period of time, is we had a student body that we felt we could challenge in that way and give that kind of freedom too. Right. And, you know, certainly I think Joni and I, for sure, we developed this entire pedagogy that involved us leaving the room for periods of time. And just letting you guys go at it. And just for the listeners, yes, there were glass walls so we could actually see what was happening. But, you know, to take ourselves out of the space and then let you guys create collaboratively. And then we could come back together and work in criticism and go back and forth. But we built, you know, I think in your senior year, we really built some terrific pieces.
Oh gosh.
That, you know, I mean, we were playing with incorporating video projection, live performance. Yeah. And then we built that whole 2-part thing that we did at the end. That was based on the improvisation, based on ephemera.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes. Oh
that
my
we made
God.
That. It was really just a beautiful, beautiful project.
I was trying to remember the name of that. That's the French thing, right?
I think we called it the French, you know, Théâtre du Soleil.
Yes.
And I believe the original piece is called Ephemera, and I think we called ours Ephemera as well.
That was wild.
I think, but it was, you know, and it just kind of started from little memories that you guys had.
I mean,
and you built these scenarios, and there's just these beautiful little moments that then we put together into this thing.
Hamlet Machine, I remember that too.
Yep.
Like we started working on
Hamlet Machine.
I mean, that's what was really just. And I'm curious because, you know, you went on to lead the theater department, you know, after my time there, and you know, I'm curious because you're doing Hamlet Machine, which is like some weird
I mean, it was amazing. It was like this communist sort of like, what was it? It was like, it was not communist. It was like German.
I wasn't communist, but yeah, it was.
But it wasn't in response to communism
German,
or
it was
something.
German expressionism. Yeah, I mean, it was an East German playwright.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was in response. It wasn't communist.
Right?
Yeah, we were communists.
Yeah.
No,
we
it
were
was
communists. No. But it was, it was an East German kind of postmodern take on Hamlet. Yeah.
Yes, and it was like a stream of consciousness.
Right? And I'm doing it with a bunch of 17-year-olds.
I mean, but it was incredible. And we did, I remember we did like we were using Mount Eden dubstep. Like I remember like Sierra Leone, we were doing all this and it was like a movement piece. And so what, I guess one of the things that, and even watching, I remember watching, like that was such an informative thing watching that Théâtre du Soleil thing. And I still like, I was trying to remember the fucking name of it like for years. And I'm glad that you reminded, it's like we were being exposed to like this very, I guess you would say high concept. Isn't high concept like actually like,
oh yeah,
like, so it was just like incredibly advanced stuff in some ways I would argue from like 15, 16, 17. And the shows we were doing, it just wasn't your normal sort of like high school theater experience. It was truly a conservatory in a lot of ways. And so I'm curious, like, please.
Yeah, I mean, it was a conservatory in many ways, because if you look at where so many of those teachers have gone on to now, we're all teaching in colleges.
Exactly.
Right. And we were all qualified to teach in colleges.
Exactly.
At the time, our certifications didn't change. We have the same degrees.
Yeah.
We have the same backgrounds. We were just, but there was a moment where we had come together as a high school faculty.
Yeah.
And, we were able to challenge each other to go back. That was one of the great things among the faculty. We were able to challenge each other, and we were able to challenge you guys and, collaboratively just kind of build the quality of the work that we were doing.
And Joni said that, Jonathan, sort of like allowed that space to exist for people.
Absolutely.
Which I think is just incredible. Yeah.
Which was, when I took over the department from him, that was, the lesson I tried to take, just get out of the way and let your teachers do their thing.
And
I mean, Jonathan's thing was, his big business just to keep the administrative stuff from falling on our heads, so that we had space to play.
Right.
And he really did that. And he trusted us enormously to build a curriculum, actually improvise a curriculum a lot of the time, because that curriculum was developed in concert with the students every year. We would be able to tailor what we were doing, to the kind of stuff that you would be interested in.
And what are the administrative challenges behind that? Just because, like, I would imagine, like, you normally have to present a curriculum, right? Or like,
it was easier. It was easier at the time because there actually wasn't a lot of curricular oversight. Because we weren't an academic program at the time.
Interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
We were just an arts program. So people didn't really care on a state level what we were doing, as long as, we were turning out artists who seemed to be qualified to audition for college programs and to successfully apply to college programs, which so many of our students did.
Yeah.
We had, generally, I think we had a 98% rate of students going on to a 4-year program.
Yeah, exactly.
So as long as you're doing that, they're going to say, okay, it's just arts. We don't have any real curricular kind of parameters that you have to hit.
Right.
We had a lot of freedom.
And
some of the, and I think that freedom still exists in the arts portion of the curriculum.
Right. And I have so many questions related to this, but the first sort of is sort of bringing this, because you guys, and I'm curious, like, how did you get involved in Academy? How did you end up there, would you say?
It's really, okay. The story is, my wife, Eileen, right?
Yes.
Who is,
of course.
She was at a luncheon for Connecticut arts administrators. And she wound up sitting next to a woman named Mitzi Yates, who's now Mitzi Yates Waterhouse, or Mitzi Yates Laraga now. But Mitzi was the director of the Academy before Herb Shepard.
Yes, of course.
Right? So Eileen gets talking to Mitzi at this lunch, and Mitzi says, "Oh yeah, I run an art school in Hartford." So that turns into Eileen getting an interview with Jonathan and getting a job in the department. which then leads to her needing a substitute teacher the following year at some point. So, hey, honey, can you cover my class? Yeah, sure, whatever. So I started as a sub.
Wow.
And, so that year, the next year, I actually became a long-term sub when a teacher left mid-year to take another job. And, after that, it just kind of, it accelerated. So yeah, I came in as a sub and just kind of I really enjoyed working with high school students in a way I didn't think that I would, but I did.
Yeah.
And so I just stayed.
Yeah.
Kind of stopped looking for other things for a while because I was just, I was just so happy with the work we were doing and we were able to do. So.
It makes me emotional to think about it because it's just like you felt that at there. You felt the love that the teachers had for the students and that you guys were
Mike,
so
leaving there was the hardest thing I think I've done professionally.
Really?
It was incredibly difficult to leave that program.
Yeah.
And to come over here full time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what was it that you really loved about working with high school students, would you say? Like, what was it?
Yeah, no, because my dad used to ask me this question all the time. Why are you just working hard? You could be doing something else. Why you said, I loved being able to kind of put a thumb on the scale at a certain point in people's lives.
Yeah.
I liked being able to meet young people kind of at that crossroads where you're going to figure out what path you're going to take next. Because you're coming up to that big decision of college and what you're going to do in college. And to be able to influence young people at that point in their life positively, I hope, is it's a real gift. And there's a real, you just know that you're doing good in the world. Right. And so that was it, to be able to just guide all the generations of you all.
Yeah.
On that piece of your journey was a great gift.
Yeah.
I could die happy after that. That's a career fulfilled.
I really, I know for a fact that's true. It's like, it was, I think more and more just about, we're kind of just talking about like how hard just this industry is and everything, and even though like I'm still doing it and it's been pretty good, it's always a hassle.
Yep.
But I just look back on my time there and I was like, that's really where I've always been performing, and it's like, but that's where it all started, and it's like the love and appreciation for the craft of what we do, and the rigor and the sense of like that this matters, and it was what you guys brought, and I'm curious, and this is a multi-pronged question, I guess, is what were some of the challenges both in bringing the advanced stuff that you guys were bringing to like high schoolers, like what were the challenges in sort of conveying this, I would argue, like pretty advanced training to high schoolers? You could also the challenges, of course, administratively. I know there's been many there as well, but
I mean, that's to say the challenges were more logistical than they were artistic. I think, there was never, I don't remember there ever being a challenge of wanting to do sort of advanced material that you guys couldn't handle.
Yeah.
Right. You guys were always up for that. The challenges were, the challenges of running a school. Okay, we have class for an hour twice a week. What are we going to do with that? It's just the time. And then, oh my God, here's a break. How can we take a break right now? And, we're in the verge of doing something. It was those were the kind of challenges, the missing things. You just, the time running out.
Yeah.
But, in terms of bringing the material, I think, even if there was more challenging material that we could have done and we would intentionally choose not to do.
Sure.
Right. So a piece of it is just knowing, I mean, you guys specifically were at a pretty advanced level. So I could bring in advanced material to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, again, you judge that class by class, year by year.
Right.
And you make that decision. Where are they? What can they handle?
Right.
So there's never a challenge with the material if you're choosing it correctly and you're choosing it appropriately for the students you're going to be working with.
You know, something I am curious about, because, you know, I even, as I said, I'm teaching, you know, I also coach Shakespeare privately. I do some of that too. So, and like, one of the hardest things I think about teaching is meeting a student where they are while still
Yeah.
pushing them.
Oh, yeah.
And bringing
Absolutely.
your bringing your principles around the work, because that's all you have, are sort of your principles. And of course, we remain flexible. And
Yep.
I'm curious, like, this might be kind of an ethereal question, but how do you meet a student where they are? How can you decipher sort of where they are? Like, what are you looking for in terms of what to bring them, how advanced they are, you know?
You know, it takes a certain amount of assessment,
Yeah.
right? It generally takes a couple of weeks of just playing.
Yeah.
And you know, figuring out. I think I do a lot of it by instinct. But it's instinct that comes out of first. You know, I don't know when I walk in a room what level any students are,
Right.
you know, or how they compare to other students at that same level.
Right.
That assessment takes work. And so I think generally most of my courses, even today, are structured around 3 to 4 weeks of assessment. 3 to 4 weeks of a simple project that let's just see how this goes so I can see where you are. And then I can see where I need to get you to and start building the bridge.
That's fascinating.
Right? I always try to, you know, I approach it all. It's a series of skills that you have to learn. You know, at the end of the semester, you need to have mastered A, B, C skill. Yeah. Where are you? How can I get you to a place where you understand these very specific things?
Right. Right.
And then if we can go deeper as we're on that journey, we'll go deeper as we're on that journey. Yeah. If we can't, at least we have the skills. So the next time we meet the journey, we can go a little deeper.
It's hard. I mean, that's you guys are such good teachers, but you know, because I'm hearing this and it's like what I'm taking away about the assessment piece too, because it's so easy to be rigid, you know, and to be like, well, this is how it's going to go, and this is what we're teaching, and this is, and not that there aren't those sort of you know, measures that you have to have, but to sort of be hands off in some ways, or to be open, just like in a process, to be like, I don't exactly know what these people need, and then trusting your instinct as you're seeing where they are.
Well, you know, and one of the things I tell my students now is, you know, you're not on my timeline. Yeah. We'll get to the end of a semester. You'll get to the end of your 4 years in school. You're not going to know anything. You're not going to know everything. You'll know something, but you won't know everything. And you know, your artistic journey is going to go on for your entire life.
Yeah.
It's not up to me to determine when you are ready to master certain concepts. I'm just shepherding you along a little bit of the way that you're going to keep going. So when you approach it like that, and you know that, you know, you're just a step in the journey, the end game is someplace that you're probably not even going to see.
100%.
Then that, I think, makes it a lot easier to work on a more flexible time frame, and you know, make sure that you're laying in good foundations. Because you know, when you're teaching, the ultimate goal is to render yourself useless. The ultimate goal is that the student can do this work without you. Yeah. So you know, as long as you approach it with that kind of humility, then you can get them to the next step and the next step. You get to shepherd them to the handoff, and there you go.
Well,
it's
that's
for someone else
important.
or for you to keep growing.
I mean, it's important with, you know, as an educator of art, right? Especially of like, like, you know, I really think about it, you know, and it's like, I you know, I have a process now, right? I use very little tools that I learned in college, you know, and I went to, you know, a great college, you know, for acting. And I don't, and I, don't get me wrong, great time. But to an extent, it's just like, because you are preparing for the professional world, there's a level of like, we're sort of like getting you in shape for it in some ways, and like for some reason it feels more, not even high stakes, I would argue, just like less independent, you know. And even though you guys did, like, I learned about objectives and actions, you know, sophomore year of a you know, it's like we learn these things, but what was really special was that independence you're talking about of an artist's process is their process, and they discover it on their own, and it's like, but what you guys instilled was the sense of creativity, of
Yeah. Well,
ownership.
with all the tools, the only time you ever really own the tools is when you discover them yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So a lot of the pedagogy is just about setting up ways that you can explore and you can discover in a guided way the tools that are going to work for you.
Yeah.
I think the part of any of our journey is, we pick up tools to throw them away. Once we understand how things work, okay, I don't need to focus on that anymore.
Right.
When I'm acting, I still have a sense of objective and action.
Right.
I know what that is, but a lot of it I just know instinctively because I know how to play, and I spent years crafting myself to be able to play an objective and an action. Now it
Right.
happens.
Right.
And I have the tool to fall back on when I need it.
Exactly.
When I have the moment, well, what's going on here? I don't know. Let me try something.
When the grace isn't coming, as I like to say.
Right. When the muse is out to lunch, you have some tools you can pull out of the bag.
And I am curious to sort of talk about this because, you took over the department, as we said, and so what changed? Because during a very tricky time, a challenging time.
Oh yeah.
And and then eventually, you I think you were doing that for like 6 years, right? Or the theater department head, 6
or
years?
7, something like that. Yeah.
And so what was that like, being the department head during and maybe we can give a little context on why it was a tricky time too. And then what made you make the decision to sort of leave it behind at the end of the day?
Yeah. I mean, it was a tricky time just in terms of our school. When I took over the program, we were in the process of, we had unified 2 schools. We had unified a full-day academic program and a half-day arts program.
Yes.
And almost immediately when I came in, we started the process of devolving those 2 programs and actually physically moving the half-day program to another campus. So the first transition that we went through was this process of just devolving these 2 intertwined programs.
Right.
Soon as we got that done, it was 2020.
Wow.
And so COVID hit us immediately.
Right.
At the end, we hadn't even fully devolved at that point. Before we kind of went out, we closed down and went remote for COVID for, we were really only fully remote for about 3 months, for March to June.
Yeah.
And then we were hybrid when we came back in September, spent about a year being hybrid. So we went through both of those transitions in my time. So a lot of the hard things were just the logistics of figuring out how to make all that happen.
Right.
It was kind of like March 12th or whatever. Everybody went home for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks. And then, Monday we got on the phone and said, okay, we got to figure out how to reinvent education. We're opening classes again on Thursday. Said, okay, let's go.
Right.
So, it's just a lot of reinvention happening. We had to, we actually had to reinvent the curriculum over the course of about 48 hours.
Right. Wow. Wow.
So it was just, and then it was learning and teaching new teachers how to teach in a different way and helping them with that stuff.
Yeah.
So there was all of that going on. And, at the same time, this is the same time, after George Floyd is murdered.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing, We See You White American Theater is starting to make the rounds, and there is a new impetus to build anti-racist practice into theater, and to be able to use theater as a tool to see more communities and meet more communities where they are.
Yeah.
So that was the final piece of these transitions that we went through.
Yeah.
So a lot of my job in charge of was just transitioning all of these transitions.
Wow.
And figuring out how to guide the curriculum through the transitions.
Wow.
And and I felt that we got the high school curriculum to a really good place.
Yeah.
In terms of how we wanted to redefine theater training for the 21st century.
Right.
For a more inclusive 21st century. And so then I was presented with the ability to take that learning and bring that to a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, bring that to a BFA professional program.
Yeah.
And so when I had that was why I decided to leave, because I felt that I still feel like this is a transition that we need in professional actor training.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
being able to be on the ground floor of that with a new director here at the Hart School who shared a similar vision, I felt it was a good time. I had an ally over here. He had an ally in me. And we had a commitment to kind of remake this program. And so the reason I left was really because it's not because I wanted to leave the high school. Like I said, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
I love that place.
Yeah.
But it just, also getting on in my career, I got about a good 10 years left.
Yeah.
I had one transition left in me.
Yeah, sure.
And this was an opportunity to take the work that I had been developing and just bring it to a different level.
Yeah.
That hopefully will have more of a national impact.
Yeah, I think we were talking before we started recording just about where you guys are taking Heart and the direction you want to take it in, and it's ahead of the curve because we were talking about sort of the death of specialization and in a lot of ways, and the artistic as you said, society is in collapse, which I agree with, but it's also like sort of these hierarchical systems of artistic institutions are under collapse.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not the same hierarchy that young actors are graduating into now.
Exactly.
So the way we have to get away from the kind of the gatekeeper model.
Yes, 100%.
Like actor training programs for years, they've run on a gatekeeper model. You get through us,
casting
and we're going to
agents,
pass you on.
right, exactly.
We're going to pass you on to the agents and the casting director, and so we are the gatekeepers. And it's just the business is not modeled like that anymore. There's so many more entry points. So I really just. Now we're on the side of the barbarians, and we need to give our students the tools to scale the barricades.
1,000%.
Right?
1,000%.
So it's a different way of looking about it. It's a different way that you're able to approach students in that way, because then you don't have to spend time molding them into somebody's idea of what an actor is or what an actor does.
Wow.
And you're really just giving them the tools to make art and make art on their own term in whatever media they choose to use.
Brian, it's funny. Like I said, not many people are talking about this. Really. I mean, there's still this.
They should be.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, because the reason why, not to get all conspiratorial, but it's because so many things rest on the hierarchy as it is, right? It's like
sure.
So many people. I was talking to a manager. Sure. On this podcast, who was like, she was like, I don't think there'll be representation in 10 years. Just blatantly said, I don't think there'll be reps anymore. We don't
need them in the same way.
100%.
We don't need them in the same. Everybody is their own representative on social media.
Exactly.
Everybody's their own representative on Actors Access, whatever. You're out there. Somebody can do a Google search and find what they're looking for.
It's democratized, it's all democratized now. And
it is. So it's fine. You have to find a different way to break through the noise.
100%.
Now you don't have an agent to break through the noise for you. You have to find your way to break through all that noise.
Exactly.
And it's a different challenge, but it is a more democratized challenge.
Well, it's much, and this is, I've had an existential crisis, especially the past, I would say, 4 months of like, why am I banging on the door of a burning house? Well, that's what it feels like. You're banging on the door of a burning house. Because to build your own house is scary, right? Because at least I know how to pitch myself. I haven't been represented in 2 years, and I've been working a lot, and I know how to go to breakdowns. I have breakdowns. I know how to pitch myself. I know how to build relationships. I know how to, but even that all feels just like, for what? Like, not, I want to make art. I love art, but it's like, it's not about being let in anymore to also, as we learned from many things from this past election, but one of the things we learned about our business is that, we are not the cultural influencers, that we do not hold the relevance that we believe we hold. So what are we going to do about that? Right. It's like, are we just going to continue to be on our mountain of like elite, and you guys, with Heartbeat and everything, like, that's for another time. But
Right.
like, you guys were always bringing it to the community, and you guys were always trying to do grassroots stuff.
Yes.
And
I
that's
had a
the only
thought
way.
there and it escaped me. There was something I was going to respond to in what you said a second ago, but it went away.
That happens.
But
That happens.
it was here's the thing. We're living in this world, right? Knowledge is power, right? We've heard this one.
Yeah.
But knowledge is determined by story. Knowledge isn't about facts anymore. Knowledge is about who can craft the narrative.
Exactly.
Right? So power lives in the narrative. And so that's what we, I facetiously tell students sometimes that we're teaching you to take over the world by becoming storytellers, by learning how to craft the narrative. Because once you craft the narrative in this world, you can craft the truth.
Listen, period.
It's scary. It's scary, but I hope they use their powers for good.
Exactly. And it's one of the things that, I think is interesting about that is that in a way, not real. I mean, of course there are facts, in a way that's always kind of been like this. I think that we're in the fourth turning moment, right? Where, I love that sort of, Strauss-Howe, generational theory. I don't know if that's your cup of tea too. It's, I could tell from maybe your face, maybe. But it's like, we're in a fourth turning moment where, as institutions collapse, as society collapses, per your point, now something else has to emerge. This is a cycle that we're always on this cycle. And I think this is sort of like the collapse of sort of FDR's America, in a lot of ways. It's
in a lot of ways it is.
It's the collapse of technocracy. It's the collapse of sort of like institutional power, of this respect. And there's a lot of scary shit behind that. There's probably, some good behind that too, maybe, but it's like, per your point, it's like all we have is the ability to, that's all human history is just being able to influence by telling a story, right? And not influence because we want the world to be this way even per se, but just to provide perspective,
Story was the first form of knowledge.
Yeah.
Myth is story. Mythos is how we understood the world.
Right.
And, that's understanding the world narratively.
And I wish that, always I wish that when I try to describe just my time at Academy, it's like, I can't do it, but like, because it's like, these were the kinds of conversations we were having in a lot of ways, or this was, it was advanced. It was advanced, and it's like, even when we were doing a musical, we were doing Urinetown, we were doing Cabaret, which are not, I would say light musicals, but like whatever play we were doing or project we were doing, it's like there was a sense of like, this isn't just fluff. Like, we are really examining something here and going deep with something here, and not in a pretentious way. It never felt pretentious to me, because what backed it up, and I was telling this to Joni, yesterday, what backed it all up was it was about work. It wasn't about like, we're talking and we're musing, and it's like, no, at the end of the day, like you said, do this.
It's product.
You're walking out of the room and we got to make something happen. So it's not like we're like, it's not dramaturgy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, though sometimes I think there is.
Dramaturgy is great.
Yeah, sometimes I have mixed feelings, but but
well, it's got to have practical applications, but it's great.
Yeah, that's true. But it's like, but it was about working. It was about working. We were working. And that was what was instilled in me. So you can examine, you can go deep without it, and still have something to show for it at the end of the day, without it being lost in sort of ether or theory. And that's what you guys did, which was just, it's incredible. You don't get that.
That's the essence of the work that we do. It's, it's performance. There's a thing that happens. If you want to get all in the ether, go write an essay. There's plenty of academic places you can do that. But the nature of our investigation is different. The nature of our investigation is something that culminates in an event, in a happening.
Wow.
That someone witnesses.
Period. Yeah, it's making me emotional thinking about it, because it's like,
sorry.
Yeah. How dare you? I don't want to feel.
Sorry.
No.
Don't feel.
No, it makes me emotional because that's what it's about. You're right. That is what's special, right? Is that, it's giving birth to an event, and it's about, you know, it's special. It's special, and you guys made it special. And, I'm very grateful for it, as I know thousands of kids are, it's
Yeah.
like, it's
Well,
wonderful.
they're young adults now, a lot of them. Some
I
of them aren't
know.
even that young anymore. Some of them got hitting middle age.
Exactly. It's true. It's true. Like when I say kids because, they're whatever. Aren't we all kids?
I say kids too, because, like, you're all still kids, no matter, how many children you all have, how many second careers you're on to. And,
Yeah, exactly.
You're always still the kids.
Well, Brian, I appreciate it. I really do. This is
is
really
great, Mike.
important conversation. And yeah, it was just providing a lot of context. So thank you. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay. Well, so this was an accidental two-parter.
Yes, it was over recording. Yes, it was.
It was an accidental two-parter because, I think we didn't realize the length of the initial interviews and also just poor planning. No. But also I think it became more because, and I think it's good because we have, I'm older, so my teachers are dead. So the perspective of the students and one of the parents, and you had Joni Weisfeld and Brian Jennings. I know Joni. I do not know Brian. I don't think I met Brian. I might have. I don't really remember. But how did hearing these perspectives for you? Because there was one moment for me. This is why I wanted to ask you this question. How did talking with these folks challenge or sort of reinforce your own memories of your time at high school?
Challenge or reinforce? Well, I think what was interesting about it was, these people were like gods in a lot of ways, and so it was kind of cool to just go back and talk about, like, what was your thought process behind the way you teached us? Say again. Taught us, sorry. Like, what was your thought process behind it? Sort of like how the sausage was made. Mm-hmm. And I say that because, you don't really get that opportunity. So that was really powerful to be like, just sort of just like almost go back and say, like, let's break it down and, like, talk to them as peers. It was kind of surreal. It was surreal.
Well, and full disclosure, what was interesting, for those listening, we didn't. Let me get my mic close to me because I never know. 7 different sounds that come out of my microphone. You never know. Either no sound, too much sound, snap, crackle, and pop sound.
It's true.
But we opted not. I opted not to listen to yours, and you opted not to listen to mine, so that we had this is our true perspective, and then we'll listen in the final take.
And so to be concise about it, it's like what was surprising to me, or not even just surprising, was just like just having the perspective of talking to these people as peers. And it was such a moment, when they were teaching me, where they were so above me. Yeah. And to be like, kind of get a sense of what their motives were, what they were trying to do with the teaching, which was never really talked about in a lot of ways. So that was really interesting. I think what was surprising was, for some reason, because basically, and we talk about this in my interviews, it's like how the program worked is that kids would go half the day to their regular public school.
Right.
And then from all over Connecticut, people would get bused to...
Right. We said this in part 1 too.
Oh, we do. Yes. Wow. And then, so that was ages ago,
But
I know, I know.
but it felt like we were in class. We only had 3 hours of class, which was shocking
You mean
to
in the
me.
latter half of the day, second half of the day?
Yeah, like we left our home schools at 12, and then we were like in class from like 1 to 4. And it felt like we were there for like it felt like I was there for 12 hours a day. And yes, if there was a rehearsal, but then I would only be there till like 6 or 7. And I was like, what? Like, it just felt that was surprising because it was such a immersive experience, and it was sort of conservatory style training in a lot of ways, but it was just truncated. So that was shocking to me. I'm like, how did these people teach us what they taught us with so little time, like during the day? I think it was Brian expressed that as one of the challenges, right, of just kind of having a truncated schedule in a lot of ways. And then I'll well, I have much more to say, but that was super surprising to me, and it was just really refreshing to get their perspective as peers. What was surprising or reinforcing to you about these conversations?
The one thing that stood out to me was when I was talking to Corey, he was talking about the toxicity of specifically running the high school program at such a high level. He was specifically talking.
What was Corey's job?
Corey Wheelahan was another student, really talented. Again, for those listening, we chose not to listen to the other interviews, so no shade to our guest.
Refresher. No,
no, but it's good. No, but it's good because I'm saying
Yeah.
I know because I was like, "Who's Brian?" Like, no shade to
Yeah.
the people that we interviewed. We just didn't. Mike doesn't know Corey. I don't know Brian Jennings. So Corey was a year or so younger than me. Super talented, really interesting guy and actor, and what I had blocked out, but he's right, is that when we did Les Mis my junior year, Mr. Dearborn, who was our high school teacher, he would put us through the ringer. So first of all, let me just say this because this relates to this. I might have mentioned we went to England to see because Les Mis wasn't playing in New York. And I said this in the first part before I interviewed Corey, and this is fascinating that I said this, and I'm just being very transparent. I said it was sort of teed up for what was the assumed principles of Les Mis to go to England. Now, we hadn't auditioned for the show yet, and what Corey was saying there was, and I know, again, this is all high school theater, so it's all kind of over. But Mr. Dearborn had basically told him that he was going to be Thénardier. And then when we got to the casting process, not only did he specifically have to sing everything, Valjean, Javert, Thénardier, Marius, we had to do it in front of one another, and it would be quite brutal. And
his notes were brutal.
Well, the competition of it was
right.
set up in a very extreme way, in a quite toxic way, and Dearborn would, sort of dangle things. And you would sort of assume, and Corey ended up being the bishop in the show. And by the way, next year, I said this in the interview, I really wanted to play Tate in Ragtime. And he got it, and I got younger brother, and I remember being quite upset about that. But the point is that what surprised me was it's easy, I think, in a lot of ways for us to go, oh, amazing. But the truth is that there were, and actually, Mike, maybe you and I did have even a bit easier, I would argue, if in our schools, we were afforded amazing casting opportunities. Same thing in college, and yet there were many people who did not like, and this is the macro point I'm trying to make, that a public high school theater program was being run like a fucking rep company.
Yeah. No, I mean, actually, that's a really good point. It's interesting to think about it that way. Like, should a public high school theater program sort of instill this in kids? Is that sort of what the point is? You know, but then I wonder, you know, this idea of like casting and the cast list, you know, there's that. I hate that I'm referencing SNL right now because it's propaganda, but you know, it's just an unfunny
I just had a
propaganda.
flashback to Hillary at the piano. This was 2008, I think it was.
What a shit show. Anyway, but you know, but there's that funny one with Will Ferrell where he's like the theater teacher. Have you seen that one? And they're all like wanting to look at the cast list. And yeah, it's just it's a lot to put kids through that. It's a lot. And you know, it is a little like, you know, in this moment where you're supposed to be blossoming artistic talent, you know, but what's the alternative, I guess? What's the alternative?
Well, the alternative, I would argue,
to not do shows, probably.
No, I was going to say, I would argue that it wouldn't be quite as merit-based on talent or the like. So that you literally you don't think about it through the lens of who's the best person for the part. You think about it through the lens of how does every person involved in my program grow? And listen, yeah. I'm not saying that my teachers weren't thinking about that, but it actually, and it was one of the questions I had for us was like, how did specifically high school theater shape who we are, not just necessarily as artists, as people? And what I was going to say was, you know, as we often self-aggrandize ourselves, we are both quite talented. I chuckle when I say it because we're good, period. But the truth is that those motherfuckers challenged me. I mean, they really pushed me.
And in what respect? How did they push you feel like?
Well, talking about the casting process as an example, talking about the environment of the expectation of, as it was called SVPA, School of Visual Performing Arts. And I mean, it shaped me and they pushed me because... And it's you know Mike that I have an obsession with getting better. I want to be better. I want to be better at everything. Everything I do, and I want to do it, and then I want to make it better. You know, whatever the hell it is. And a lot of that came from my time specifically with Pat Woodward and Pat Dearborn. And Pat Woodward, just to be clear, wasn't even a teacher at the school. She was brought in to direct one show a year, our showcase. But these people really challenged us, and so while it and so I'm here for the next level element of it, because it not only made me a better artist, but I do think that it asked, and because I was practically helping to run we were producing things, it really shaped my initial entrepreneurial instincts, creative entrepreneurial instincts in that environment. That's how it shaped me. How did it shape you?
Because it created like a sense of like always wanting to be better.
Well, yeah, and it was my first taste of you're good, you can do better. You're good, it's not good enough. There are other, and I also think, if I may, I do think that being 12 miles from Manhattan made a difference. Tommy, sure one of the guys I interviewed, who was Javert in that Les Mis, reminded me that our musical director, I think, had played the show on Broadway. I forget his name, but Greg DeLugos, he said his name was. And I remember him being, for a high school musical director, you know, this guy, this Broadway pianist, he had high expectations of us. And that was like, that was a lot to take in at 16 years old.
Right. Well, this is sort of what makes, I think what's interesting about one of the big takeaways I had too, and what was your question? It was how did it influence us today? I do want to say one thing to this, which is like, I think that what was powerful, it sounds like, in both of our scenarios, was these people treating us like peers in high school with clear boundaries. At least I felt like there were some really clear boundaries. I know there's a struggle there, but like there was a sense of both Brian and Joni really talked about that, how there was a strong sense of, Joni never, I think, used the word teach. She said, to collaborate with high school students was one of the biggest joys of my life. And so did Brian. Brian said to collaborate with kids. And that to me is so powerful. I think about a show, whatever, that you and I did, right? And a certain somebody. You know what I'm talking about. Raucous fun time. Didn't feel like a collaboration. It's very rare to find directors who truly collaborate with artists. The only time I've ever really experienced it is Bedlam. That's kind of the only time I've ever really experienced a sense of I'm not being directed, I'm being collaborated with, truly, and given space to sort of, and I don't know if that was your experience, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it's
No, we were
truly
directed.
you felt like you were directed. Yeah. I guess that was what was really special about Academy. And, I was just Brian, there would be times where, I think I said this too in the first thing we recorded, it's Joni would give us Trojan women and just go, here you guys go, make something. And then she would literally leave the room. And she would just leave us in the room for an hour. And we would have to show something to her. And, Brian would do the same thing. And Brian was saying that was a very specific part of the pedagogy that we were doing, is we would give you guys something, ask you to build something, and we would walk out. We would literally leave the room. That was very intentional. There were glass windows so I could see what was going on. But he was that was very, very, very intentional when we did that. And it was shocking to me. It was for so many reasons. Even though I did mention this, it was just it was shocking to me for a few reasons. As somebody who's taught actors, it's so hard to do that. I
To
can't
leave
imagine
to what?
to let your actors bring their shit to the table first, and not
Why do you think that,
handhold
out
it.
of curiosity?
Oh God, I don't think many people. I like I said, I have not experienced very many people who do that. Who really sort of trust actors and want to collaborate with them and leave them to their own devices and then shape later.
Interesting. I mean, that's literally all I think ever should happen, and it's the only way that I really direct. And actually, if I may, sometimes to my own detriment. And I'm
In what
thinking,
respect?
well, I'm thinking of one specific show that I directed not too long ago. Well, there were so many factors that were getting in the way. Talking about, sorry, this is pivoting now from high school theater, but to your point about Bedlam, I just want to say this because it relates to the point I'm making. I would argue that for that to be the case, there has to be, this is such a generalization, but a bit of lawlessness. And what I mean by that is specifically with this other experience, the intimacy work was making that very challenging. Because and we're going to do an episode, because I'm really fascinated about this, about intimacy coordination, because I don't, in no way do I think it should, I think it's a great tool. But to your point about collaboration and actually why it's fascinating that they did that, it is risky to do that in high school of all places, is that it really requires almost okay, let's leave all PC at the door, maybe. Let's leave a sense of hierarchy at the door. Right. Let's leave a, there's an, there.
Well, it was a different time too,
Exactly.
And they actually were saying it's a little harder to teach now for the very reasons that you're saying, is that it's a little harder for their teaching styles. Not because,
sure.
And by the way, Brian and Joni especially were always very, very, in my experience, and I know for I can't think of one instance where this is not the case. They were tough. They were very tough, and they demanded a lot, but it never got personal. It just never got like, you're not like chatting with them after. Like, there was no, for lack of putting it, there wasn't a personal relationship. I never felt that way. And as somebody who was really like, there was never a personal relationship, and in a good way. And I say that because there was a distance. And one of the things they said was it's hard. Your class was very easy because you guys had a great class and you're all very talented. It all starts with casting. You have to trust the people that you're putting in the room.
Yes.
And and so that was really kind of shocking to me, just to remember that that's what we fucking did. Like, it's like, why wouldn't you direct a show potentially? Why wouldn't you direct a show as like, you guys go work on this scene, come back in like 45 minutes. And I'm not saying that that's like, but to do that and then to be sort of egoless enough to see what the artist brings to it, because that's what's hard for me to do. That is you have to leave ego at the door, because I have a lot of very strong opinions about the text we're working on what good acting is. And I'm not saying that they didn't. They certainly did, but it still always started with what the student was bringing and what they could discover on their own first.
Well, part of what I was thinking about was, I'm a pretty smart person, and yet I don't really remember learning much in high school except at SVPA. I took all these AP courses. That we had a CGI civics and government program that I was part of. I AP French, AP Calculus, AP Physics. I mean, but what was I doing? I don't remember any of that. And I'm saying this because where I learned, where I was in, and I want to say it's interesting because one of the things I love about being an artist, one of the things I do like about, and as I get ready to direct this another show, one of the things I specifically, and it relates to this, like about directing even more, is how much you learn.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of in this environment of learning about a period, learning about a history, learning about structure. You're learning about so many things through art. Right. And I don't think I learned much through my time in practically any other class. SVP wasn't even a class.
So much of it's memorization. I mean, so much of high school. I completely agree, and hearing you talk about that, and sort of what I took for granted was, it all started here. Like, it all really started there, at Academy. Like, yes, I'd been performing for a while.
Yeah.
But the sense of rigor, the sense of also ownership of work, independence, leadership, I mean, that's where I came alive in a lot of ways and look, I know some people didn't like me for this, but I was somebody where it's like, okay, like, we were given an assignment, somebody would leave, and I would kind of lead in a lot of ways. I would lead. And I just coming up with ideas like, oh, what if we did that? Like, it's like, and it gave me a sense of ownership and confidence because I discovered my artistic voice in so many ways. And what's different about that? And the other thing they emphasized, and it was true, like, they were like, well, you guys are making your own work constantly. And I was like, you're so right. That is what we were doing. We were constantly making our own work. Even like, I think about even how the shows were directed too. It was like, it felt very self-generated. And I don't mean that in a detrimental sense. And I say this to go, when you go to school, to conservatory, one of the things that I'm thinking of now that is kind of a detriment, and I wonder ultimately sort of a stunting activity, is, well, it's not about what you bring to it. It's not about your voice. It's not about, like, what your point of view is. It's like, no, we are breaking you down to build you up in a very specific type of way. It's not to discover who you are artistically.
Well, let me ask you this question though, because this is, when you said that about that and you saying that it goes back to the beginning, this is this conversation we've been having a lot. I mean, literally every episode, but recently about art and commerce. And I want to bring it up in relation to this because, we wanted to do this episode because there's something about the origins of where, like, for the first time, we're going, oh, this is a special, opportunity. I'm good at this, whatever the fuck. But we go home and our parents feed us. And then we get to go and do the thing again. And then we go to college. And to your point about breaking down, I from a training perspective, maybe you're right. But then what are we working towards? Meaning, what is the quote unquote real world like, per your point about Bedlam being a bit of a unique experience, in which I would also agree.
Sure.
But actually the macro point I'm trying to make is that interesting that we look back on this moment in our lives when thinking about making money from it, when thinking about it in all of its forms and what it needs to do for us, i.e., oh, now I need to make my self-generated Trojan women piece has to make sure that I bring in $4,000 next month. It's a whole other conversation.
Sure.
And while that's not the point of this episode, it is making me just think about this because it relates to this idea of art and commerce and relates to literally what you're saying about, well, then what's the next step and what changes? And is that a good change? I don't know, because I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, one thing that's related to this, but then I want to answer that more directly is, like, one of the things that it made me makes me think about too is, like, oh, really, it is all about casting, isn't it? It's like, I used to not believe that because, like, I could be anything. I could do anything. And it's true. Like, I feel like I could, with enough prep, like, do almost anything. I actually do feel that way. I think I'm trained enough and I think I'm skilled enough to do that. However, I have a unique essence. I have a unique essence that I can bring to something. And it's like, casting is, it is 95% of the job when it comes to, because you are casting people for their unique essences, or either that, or you're casting them how well they can like execute your vision, which sort of relates to this question about, like, does conservatory prep you for, like, well, you need to be able to do anything. You need to be able to execute somebody's vision very well. And that's what it takes to feed yourself, right? And sort of like, and that is more, quote, practical. But one of the things that I do believe at the end of the day, low key, is that is still, like, the industry's value judgment, right? The industry still values, sort of like, in my opinion, personal opinion, and maybe I'm wrong about this, not safe, but safe. It's like, even though we change the color of the people on stage or their body types or whatever, the work going on is still basically the same type of work. There's still sort of like a, for lack of a better way of putting it, and I'm getting esoteric, like, there's not much. I don't watch a performance very often and I'm like, whoa, wow, what that person is uniquely bringing to it is interesting. I'm like, it's more so of like, oh yeah, that person is living up to the way it was, quote, written or something. And but very rarely do I watch an artist on stage and go, like, wow, what are they bringing? Like, I appreciate that they're bringing something unique to the table here. And I think we are heading in that direction. What we talk about, I don't think the industry is catching up to this. But, it's what we talk about. If we're learning, and it's funny that Brian, I was telling you this off mic, he's sort of helping Hart sort of the Hart School restructure some of their curriculum. And he's like, but he basically said is like, we're training storytellers. And that sounds like, okay. But what he means is sort of what we talk about in terms of like the death of specialization, harnessing a unique point of view, using different mediums to discover this. Because this is where the industry, not even the industry, I would say, this is where the world is headed, with social media valuing, unique perspectives and unique people. And, I say this when I fucking teach. I was saying this last night, even like, at the show, because we had some technical difficulties and, everybody's, like, well, how am I going to do this? Or, I was like, guys, well, this is why we're not AI, baby. It's because we're not going to nail it. There's nothing to nail here. There's nothing to like hit. An AI can come in and perform the best job. An AI will be able to come in and perform the best job at the thing and get it the most right. And so I do think that while I don't think the industry is catching up to this quite yet, I think the world is at a point where it's like, we don't care about, and Brian was saying, this is like, we live in a post-factual world. We live in a world where who can craft the best narratives. There is no right way to tell the story. There is no mark to hit, I would argue, or at least I can't take that approach. And nor do I think that that's what's going to put theater in the dust, institutional theater in the dust, is because they're still kind of fixated on the right way to do X piece, and it leads to safety, it leads to, whatever. I don't know if this makes so I think that we will head in the direction where that is more of a commodity in a lot of ways.
Yes. So all good points. I'm not totally sure how it related to what we were saying, but I'm with you.
Well, because you're saying basically like it's easy to make it's easier to do your experimental piece on Trojan women when your bills are paid, but when you have to engage in art and commerce,
right,
you can't be that risky, and you have to think more about. And what I'm saying is I think that will be what breaks through the noise. I'm not talking about even the style of an experimental piece. I'm talking about unique theater. I'm talking about risky theater. I'm talking about, theater that is not correct in terms of like, here's another production of Death of a Salesman. That's like the
I think there are probably thousands of examples of that going around the world. I would argue on commercially O'Mary, to everything from like
Jamie Lloyd's work, even though sometimes it's not great. Yep.
Sure, but I'm not even thinking commercially. I am thinking like, all the work that goes on, again, literally all over the world. But I hear what you're but I would argue that what you're kind of getting at is actually not risky theater. It's about a modern artist with a point of view.
Yes.
And so it's not just the work being made, and you're talking about it in relation to art and commerce, because it's not just about the skill set of the person anymore. It is about so much more, as we've been talking a lot about having being free thinking.
Swing at it. Yes, let me take a very concise swing at it. I think the difference between my college education and my high school education was college prepared me to be a cog in a machine.
Right. Yes.
And that
Bessida once described it to me as a trade school.
And that's what, it prepared me to be a cog in the machine. And
yeah,
that is, and I think that what you're saying is, well, isn't that sort of a safer or more financially secure sort of training system, perhaps? Because it's easy to not take that approach when you're guaranteed, your survival needs will be met. And what I'm arguing is I don't think a cog in the machine approach.
I'm not. And what's actually, to be actually honest with, what I really was talking about was emotion. I was talking about art and commerce. No. I was really talking about that time in our lives when we didn't have to worry about anything else. and how your comment about the training, which, yes, I think you're right, so right, related to the dollar and thinking, let's make these, working actors who will then be able to do anything, and how that, I understand the point you're making there. But really what I was trying to get at was what we were saying about when you're left in the room to make the Trojan women piece, that's all you have to worry about. That's all you have to worry about. And in our conversations recently about everything else we have to worry about,
Sure.
how that works ultimately, more than likely not, against the artist.
Well, this will come out after New American Ensemble, but I just have to say one thing that kind of blew my mind. Because, it's a showcase contract. We're getting paid very well for a showcase contract. And, one of the things that's really important to Jana, who is the production manager type of person, one of the co-founders, she's like, look, an actor's job is to get more work. What if we, one of the goals we want to build to is a salary, is a yearly salary for our company? Because then what if when you're able to eliminate, my job is to get the next job, is to do such a good job and to stand out so much that I can get the next job, then you actually have to return to the question of, well, okay, if that's not what am I doing then? What is art if it's not to get the next job? And it blew my mind to go like, it's such a valid point that the pressure to sort of have this job springboard to the next or whatever,
right.
It becomes almost the smoke screen, not really because it's necessary. It's a smoke screen that actually keeps you from asking the main question of, well, why the fuck am I doing this in the first place? You get caught sort of in that feedback loop of like next job, and you don't ever have to actually face, well, okay, if that's all taken care of, why am I doing this anyway? Why am I doing this? And yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, well, what it's making me think about too randomly is not just next job, but all the factors. Meaning, as we get older, I'm thinking about this job that I just turned down. That as we get older, there are more considerations than just money and next job. There is, in fact, there's another woman in that show who might not be able to. She's like, my kids come with me. They come with me.
Sure.
And so I'm bringing this up in relation to this conversation about the high school theater, even because it was also it was simpler then.
It was. No, you're very right. It was simpler.
And what an invaluable opportunity to be all immersed in the thing, because when I think about what I ultimately walk away with there, it was a true understanding of my passion. And two of the conversations we've been having about being millennials and monetizing our passions and feeling like we can chase it. Listen, it's the thing that I loved the most. Yeah. And while it might not come easy today or there might be moments that are easier than others, it's still the thing that I love the most. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that because I don't know if I was pretty serious about where I was going to school. Becca, who I interview as well, and her mom, who was sort of like my surrogate mom, and we went everywhere. And we did all the basics: Carnegie Mellon, Ithaca, Michigan, CCM, Boco, Miami. We did them all. But I don't think I would have done that had I not been in an environment where not only was my passion fostered, but people around me were like, and you can keep doing this.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because there was even a discussion whether or not I would even go to college at one point, if I would just go to New York and I was thinking about just going to New York, but I never really considered it that much because it wasn't even because I need more training. It wasn't even that because, part of me is kind of allergic to that idea, but it's like, it was because what my high school experience did actually was take it out of performance, because you do it because you love it. You're on stage, people are clapping. You feel great when you're performing. I think sort of what my high school experience did for me was it laid down the roots of who I am as an artist. It laid down those really strong roots of like, and why and how it could be something more emotionally, process being really important, and discovery, inspiration, and building, and not to talk shit or smack. And it's not look, there's so much I got out of college, but I kind of realizing now that I think college, while it was a wonderful experience, in a lot of ways took that sort of dulled that down a lot. I think it dulled it down in some ways.
I think, okay, but wasn't it you who said that you initially wanted to go to NYU's experimental program?
Yeah.
Well, if I may, it just sounds like the School of the Arts, I don't know how much you looked at their training and the way that they trained, but obviously it's not going to go NYU experimental route.
Of course, yeah.
But I say that because, and I know you're not coming for the school per se, you're just talking about your experience, but it sounds like maybe you just ended up and you picked a program that didn't maybe align with your values that you may not have even understood at the moment.
I think actually that may be true. I think that actually may be true. The more I think about it. Like,
well, because NYU's experimental versus University of North Carolina School of the Arts, as run by Gerald Friedman at the time.
No, very different.
Literally,
no, they could not be more different. And that was, but what was interesting, if I may, what was interesting about that? Well, by the way, I didn't get into ETW. I got into the Meisner School, so that was a big blow. I got a big scholarship, but I didn't get into. So I was kind of like if I got into ETW, it might have been it was going to be more of a challenge. But even if I was as I was thinking of ETW or somewhere like North Carolina School of the Arts, I remember even thinking like, well, I could transfer to ETW after a year or 2 years. But even at that age, I kind of knew what to your, and I know this wasn't the point you're making really, but it's like, I was like, well, that if I want to be famous and I want to be like a professional, like working actor, it's like, I need to go there, North Carolina School of the Arts. Like, that's where I need to go because I know that's a, quote, better school. I know that's a school where you get more of like this industry almost based training in some ways. Like, I even knew that at the time. You know what I mean? And yeah, this isn't like meant to, but yeah, it makes me, I look back and I'm like, yeah, that probably actually was not the right choice. Actually. I mean, it was because that's where I went.
Well, the only reason why I say it is because it's not that I actually, right. It's not that I disagree with you, but I also like, it's like, you and I are in the midst of developing curriculum right now. And the truth is that while it doesn't need to be one size fits all, some macro principles need to be one size fits most. And there are going to be people who won't like it, won't respond, could use something different. And the question is, well, should they be here in this class or is it our responsibility? And I'm saying this because, as we've long established, I am inherently a bit of institutionalist. I don't believe the government should tell us about aliens because I understand that we need to protect world order. But I appreciate that you're like telling me what I want to see him. I want to go shake hands. I'll be first in line. Me and Nina, my sweater I'll wear for 6 days straight. We'll be in Arizona. I'll be right in line. No, but I'm just saying it because to your point about the ETW, like, yeah, you probably, Mike, you're a free thinker. That's just naturally
this
who
is
you
where
are.
I need to return. But you know what this, I'll tell you what the conversation really did for me. And you know, I've been in a rut. And I feel like I'm on the other side of this rut. I'm coming out of the other. I've been depressed. And these conversations with them, and even with NAE too.
Who?
New American Ensemble. But it's making me realize, and I'm sorry, I'm going on. It's like this isn't my therapy session, but the intensive arts at school. You know, my intensive arts pieces were fucking awesome. They were fucking awesome. Yeah. And like they were different, and they were, and that returning to that foundation of true creation, not even creation, like, you know, it's like, making my, you know, it's like, and that's what I respect about Joni and Brian to this day is, first off, they truly loved teaching kids. They truly loved teaching high schoolers. And the other thing I really respect is this idea of, like, you know, artistic creation, experimentation, you know, working together to create something. You know, these are the roots I have to sort of return back to in some way. You know, I even had a thought flash in my head just now where I'm like, I'm not going to do it, never in a million years. But I'm like, maybe, you know, going to grad school somewhere, not to fucking Yale or fucking NYU grad, but going to like some fucking weird ass fucking place, you know, probably Middlebury, not really, but like, you know, because I probably couldn't stand the people there. But, you know, it's like going somewhere like that to just reawaken that collaborator creator instinct, you know, experimental instinct that is foundational to who I am as an artist. And I've gotten so far removed from it with the industry piling on. And what I'm saying is the reason why it makes sense for me to do that is because that's going away, I believe, in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, like that's what it really did for me.
Yeah. I mean, I have a thought about that, and I might say it.
Just say it, whatever.
Well,
you're fat and ugly. Anyway.
No, actually, if I may, what I just wrote down actually this is a good episode. I want to do to grad school or not to grad school, sure. You know, because
I'm never going to grad school, by the way, but yeah.
But I do think it's an interesting question because what I hear you talking about is waking something up. And what's interesting about so much about what our work is, at least for me, and when I personally talk about autonomy over time, and a through line, if I may, of work that we're making, it's like, how is every single fucking day, from morning, noon, and night, the creative world that I want it to be? You know, and that to me is, at least for me, what I want to fight for, because I do hear what you're saying, and when you talk about like talking to them, because similarly, I mean, it was great reconnecting with Becca and Bunny and Tommy and Corey, and as I'm sure it was for you with Joni and Brian, and you know, Mike, what you're getting at too, when we, you know, for those listening, when we talk with people about artist statements or their creative missions or even point of view, whatever it is, at least for me, one of the ways that when someone's feeling stuck, when they think about that, what am I doing this for? I often say, well, go back to the beginning.
Right.
Go back to when you remember it really meaning something and mattering to you. And to me, everything we're talking about is we're these reflections on a moment in our lives when in some ways we found ourselves. Even if we knew the interest was there, like you're saying, these people, Brian and Joni and Pat for me, and even these students I spoke with, and of course Bunny, who was like a surrogate mother to me, you know, they it shaped me in ways that it's so corny, but they're like they're deep in my soul with those 4 years. And I'm so appreciative, period. So thank you for those who were part of this episode. I'll kick off comfort food performances, and I'm going to do a nod to the guests that we had on, because my senior year we did ragtime. And I was younger brother. I start there because I didn't want to be younger brother at all. And to be honest with you, Mike, I was bad. Corey disagrees with me. We talked about it. I was not a good younger brother. It was too much. I was over the top. But Tommy was father, Becca was mother, and Corey was tate. And they were all great. I was the weak link in that production, but the three of them are my comfort food performances.
You know, where my mind goes, Joni did a production of The Seagull. I think when I was I must have been a sophomore. Who the fuck was in it? I don't remember many of these people. I think Alex Seeley was in it. Logan George, who, if you know Logan George,
I know Logan George.
He's a filmmaker. He's done really well for himself as a filmmaker. He was Trigorin. I think. Jade Anderson was in it. Michael's friend Jade. You send me. No, get out of here, doggy. Jade Anderson, and this production was just fucking incredible. And I just remember the performances. It was just a curtain on stage. It was very experimental, and it was just an incredible production. The performances were just amazing. I remember that really distinctly. So that's my comfort food performance.
The Seagull. I want to see a great production of The Seagull.
Marissa Savick, she was in it. I think Sarah Drake might have been in it too. It was just a really, really powerful production. So, yep, that's it.
Thanks, girlies.
All right, bye.